They're not expecting a fight.
Power concedes nothing.
I am trying to protect our interest.
We're not each other's enemy.
Women are like tea bags. You don't know their strength until they get into hot water.
We know that you know our secret.
What secret? Vampires are real.
Kinda tickles.
That is worse than a Bible. That burns my eyes.
I'm changing. I'm becoming stronger.
TGIF.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Coworkers die. Vampire roommates, they're forever. JD? Yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome to Sublime Primetime 2020, presented by the Writers Guild of America West and the Writers Guild Foundation in partnership with Variety and Final Draft. I'm Jenelle Riley, I'm an editor of Variety, and tonight we're going to be joined by 8 of this year's Emmy nominees in the categories of comedy and variety series. Just watching the slides just now that were up, there was so much great TV this year, and I'm so thrilled to have some of these great artists with us. Thank you so much for being here, and help me to join me in welcoming tonight's guests, Kristen Bartlett and Mike Drucker. They are the co-head writers of Full Frontal with Samantha B. We have Sam Johnson and Chris Marcil. They are writers and co-executive producers for What We Do in the Shadows. Also, we have Tony McNamara. He is the creator, showrunner, and executive producer of The Great. Stefani Robinson, a writer and executive producer on What We Do in the Shadows. Michael Schur, creator, showrunner, and executive producer of The Good Place. And Paul Sims, a writer and executive producer of What We Do in the Shadows. Thank you all so much for being here.
You're welcome
for having us.
Yeah.
You're all so polite. Whenever I have people as accomplished as you all are, I actually like to go back to the beginning and just sort of ask, when did you feel you could call yourself a writer? Was there something you wrote that maybe it was the first thing you sold or the first thing you were truly proud of? When did you realize that you were well on your way? We can start with Mike because he's in my upper corner.
Honestly, the first time I thought that I could be a writer was the first time I sold a freelance headline to The Onion. It only paid $50, but it was this big moment where something I'd kind of always dreamed about happened, and I realized that maybe I could do that a second time and then a third time. So honestly, just that freelance $50 for that assignment.
What was the headline?
I think it was something about like the 2008 election, and I don't remember what it was, but it wouldn't hold up.
How could you not remember? I gotta Google this later.
Michael Schur, what about you?
Yeah, I was probably getting hired at SNL. When I graduated, I wasn't at all sure that I could be a writer or even really wanted to. And so I gave myself a year to try to get an actual job. And then I was going to go to grad school. And then I got hired at SNL like 6 months into that year. And so that was like, well, I guess I'm a writer now because someone's going to pay me to do it. So that was I didn't think of myself as a writer until the first time I showed up in that office.
Wow, right out of college.
Yeah, well, not right out. Well, I interviewed right when I got out. And I walked around the offices to have meetings with the producers, and they had us in pairs. And I remember thinking, like, there's no way I'm going to get this job because this lady I'm going around with is way funnier than me. And it was Tina Fey, and I was right. And so she got hired, and I didn't. And then halfway through the year, some people left or something, and then they hired me. So it wasn't right out of college, but it was pretty close.
Wow, that's amazing. Paul, what about for you?
Probably when I got hired at Spy Magazine after college, and actually got paid as a writer, and got paid $13,000 a year. Yes, New York. But you know what? I got paid for writing, so I think that counts as being a writer.
It beats Mike's $50 for the headline.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it depends on how many headlines he writes in a year, doesn't it?
You had 6,500 headlines.
Stephanie, what about you?
I did the same as everybody else. It wasn't until I got my first job. I was staffed on the show Atlanta, I think like a year and a half after moving out here And it wasn't until then, and I was actually getting paid and showed up the first day in the writer's room, that I felt comfortable calling myself a writer. And then I think took a little bit of time after that to feel totally comfortable saying it too.
So you're comfortable now?
I think so. I'm here, yeah.
Chris, what about for you?
I think it's when I could stop temping. You know, I got a real job, and for even a couple of years after that, Sam and I were hired as editors at National Lampoon. And for 2 years after that, on my bulletin board, I still had my Kelly time card up. Because you just, you know, you never know.
Wow, I remember Kelly. I did Kelly.
Yes, no, I temped. I had an excellent temp gig at Brooklyn Union Gas. With like people who would talk about like going into the city, like only on their anniversary. You know, like people from like Bay Ridge and stuff like that.
Sam, for you?
Yeah, it's about the same time. I mean, Chris and I were trying to write together at the same time, so it was around then. We sold a piece to the New Yorker in, I think, 1987, and we really felt like we had it made, that was it. We're in the big time. We are New York writers, and we celebrated by taking ourselves, I think, where did we go? To like the Algonquin? We went
to the Algonquin.
Yeah, we went to the Algonquin
lunch. Yeah.
For lunch, and we saw our editor there, and it was incredibly humiliating, and we never sold another piece to the New Yorker after that.
Tony, for you?
I think it was probably when I started in theatre. It was probably when I had my second play on, because I felt like the first one might have been an accident. But when I got the second one on, I was like, oh, maybe. I didn't really call myself a writer. I just sort of mumbled it occasionally. And then at some point I was like, oh, I seem to be getting paid. And that was it.
That is, I don't mean to interrupt, but that is, still when I have to fill out a form and it says occupation and I write down writer, I still feel like a little corny doing that.
It feels like a lie to me. It always feels like a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kristen, what about for you?
I think for me also, starting working at SNL was the big one, because that's when I finally deleted my LinkedIn, and that was like, okay, I don't have to do this, you know?
That is a big moment, saying goodbye to LinkedIn.
Best in the world.
Yeah, it's like in the movies when the guy takes off his tie and just, you know, fuck this.
Well, all of you are part of very unique shows, and I feel like each one of them is unlike anything else on television. I'd love to know for the creators, where did the initial idea come from, and how did you develop it? I'd love to start with Tony, because you recently earned an Oscar nomination for your take on historical events with The Favorite. And I believe that The Great actually kind of started as a play, or that was its original origins?
Yeah, originally it was a play a while back, and then I'd been doing some TV, and I'd done a long time working in TV, and then I just thought it would make a good TV show, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't think it. My wife thought it, and I just did it. She wanted me to do it.
It's not based on that first play you mentioned that you don't really. Is it?
No,
really?
it's like I think it was like my fifth play.
Okay.
And it's based on that.
What interests you in these real life events, putting your own twist on them?
I think it's because I just like I'm not polite. Period drama is sort of too polite for me. So it was more like I just liked the character of Catherine the Great. You know, she kept the Enlightenment alive and took over a country that wasn't her and invented the roller coaster. And so that seemed good. And when I found out about her, all I knew about her really was that maybe she banged a horse. And so I thought maybe it was like, you know, it seemed very contemporary, that a person's life that was rich and varied could be boiled down to some salacious, misogynistic headline. So she just seemed a great character and an interesting sort of, like, and I could kind of see a way to make the style of the show a bit different. So
yeah, absolutely. And Michael Schur, The Good Place ended after 4 perfect seasons, and you really got to see your vision through from start to finish. I'm sort of curious, where did you get a show about? I know it's about a lot of things, but it's set in the afterlife. And is it something that you had to pitch? And what were kind of people's responses when you told them what the premise was?
Yeah, I had to pitch it, but I didn't pitch it until I knew what the whole first season was, including there's a big twist at the end of season 1.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. so because I had the idea and I thought, well, this is weird, and I'm not sure. It was a combination of like, I'm not sure they would be into it, and also I'm not sure I could write it. Like I sort of felt like, well, this is a big, gigantic premise, but I'd never written a big premise before. Most of the stuff I'd worked on was pretty lo-fi, and it was just people hanging around, and so I didn't really commit to sort of trying it until I like knew what the whole season was. So by the time I pitched it, it was less of a high risk venture than I think it might retroactively seem like it was. And I had also already talked to Ted Danson and Kristen Bell about it. And so when I was sort of like, these are the people that I want to be involved in this, that becomes a very easy sell. So I knew it was a tough sell. And so I tried to make it a less tough sell by giving them NBC and Universal like a very complete picture of what it was going to be. And also by attaching people to it that I knew that they would be happy to have on a show. So, that I had the luxury of having enough time to do that. I don't know that I'll ever have that again. But it really helped. It was like it took something that might've been hard to get off the ground and made it possible,
When you did pitch it, did they seem excited or confused, or maybe both?
No, they were excited. To their credit, they I sort of pitched it as a show about what it means to be a good person, and that was already in 2015. That was already a thing that people were talking a lot about, and they maybe were a little bit iffy on the fact that it was going to involve actual like ethical philosophy. And I told them that I said, I promise I won't make this feel like homework. And then I think like in the second episode, one of the characters Chidi is standing at a blackboard and it says like philosophy 101 on it. And I was like, okay, well, I made it feel like homework. But they didn't flinch from that. To their credit, they were really, network TV has this sort of stigma of being sort of populist or crude or something, but they never tried to talk me out of it, which was really nice. Also, I just want to say that Tony's show is my favorite show in any genre of the whole year, and I kind of hope he wins.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Paul.
Stephanie, Samantha.
That show is incredible. I just have to say that show, I think that show is unbelievable, and I don't know how you did it. And someday when we're not on a Zoom with 8 other people, I'm going to call you and make you tell me how you did it.
It's actually more like 200 other people, but I want to ask the writers of What We Do in the Shadows. This is obviously based on the hit movie of the same name, but the series really, it brings in totally new characters and new location. How do you go about honoring the spirit of the film, but also making the show your own?
I think, I don't know how we do it. We just do it. I mean, Jermaine and Taika, having Jermaine so involved and Jermaine and Taika directing the pilot together, just the DNA was already there. Our worries early on was how do we make it as funny as the movie with new characters? But then when we found those actors, we felt very confident. And I think it's just two things we adhere to, which is strictly adhering to documentary rules, even when there's a temptation to want a close-up or something that the documentary crew couldn't capture. And then the second one is strictly adhering to vampire rules, which of course don't exist, and we argue endlessly about, and all claim to know what actually vampires can and can't do. So I think it's those two things.
Was everyone on the show familiar with the movie when you came out for the job?
I think for the most part, I had been a fan of not only Taika and Jermaine, but the movie, and Paul had worked on Flight of the Conchords with those guys as well, which is another show that I was a fan of. So for me, it was definitely more in line, I guess, with the comic sensibilities I had grown up with. As I mentioned before, I had worked on shows like Atlanta, which are very, it's a funny show, but it is very autobiographical. I feel like we do deal a lot with things that at times feel heavy and, a little bit more complicated as far as the show's relationship with the world that we're living in America. But I think the temptation to work on a show like What We Do in the Shadows was, I think, sort of like escapism in that way, that it was a show purely about being funny. The goal is to be funny. We weren't really concerned about making a commentary on the world as it was, and it sort of felt like an old school throwback to the kinds of shows that I grew up watching, which were just, how can a group of people living together be funny, and what do these relationships look like? And I mean, really sort of leaning into that versus these moral dilemmas that I think feel like they're more prevalent in the comedy drama today.
And for Kristen and Mike, in addition to having to honor Samantha Bee's very specific voice, what did you know that you sort of wanted to do differently with her show when you were getting it off the ground?
Well, we are not the people who got it off the ground, so gotta let you know that. We came much later. Mike and I just became head writers back in February.
Which was a great time to become a head writer on the show.
Good time. So credit to the people who got the show off the ground, and obviously Sam, like that's her voice. But when we became head writers, I think one of the things that we really wanted to do was be a bit sillier, which we succeeded at for about a month. And then we went through a pandemic and we had to stop being silly again.
Yeah, one thing, because the hard thing about writing for a topical political comedy show, especially now, is everything's so dour and everything's so sad. And we have to cover those topics and we have to cover them seriously. But Kristen and I really made it sort of the mission to not just we didn't want to just talk about it. We wanted to make a way to actually make it entertaining to watch and have Sam have more fun. Things like adding jokes that maybe surprise her a little more, just kind of weird it up. Especially being remote without an audience now, we've sort of been able to free ourselves a bit to not necessarily rely on the audience's response and do more weird things that they might not necessarily have loved.
How did you sort of react when, was there ever a moment when you thought you would just stop the show, or did you always know that even during the pandemic you would continue?
Sure. I think we found out that we were going to have an audience, what was it, March 12th?
I think it was March 12th or whatever that day was.
Roundabout. We found out there were confirmed coronavirus cases in our building, and our building was being evacuated, and we had a show that was written and we wanted to put it on. And so as the building was being evacuated, we sort of rushed into the studio and did our last show. We found out that there was going to be an audience that morning before we knew of the confirmed cases. And so we decided to write a bunch of jokes in that Sam would be reading for the first time. And that's one of our favorite things to do to Sam in rehearsal. We just enjoy seeing her react to something insane that we make her say. So it was great to bring it to the show. And then the week after, we knew we weren't going to be able to go back into the studio. So there was a lot of worry, but we tried to put some stuff out online, and that was proof that we could keep the show going. And Sam obviously shoots the show with Jason Jones from her backyard.
I have to say, a lot of these shows that are being shot in quarantine, I'm so impressed by. I think the writers here on narrative shows, probably it sounds like a nightmare to do that. But a lot of these talk shows have really stepped up, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
We're very lucky that Jason Jones is Sam's husband. We're very lucky that she married a comedy person who knows how to direct.
I would love to know how your writers' rooms work. For each of you, do you break the whole season together and go off and write specific episodes? And how do you make it feel like one cohesive voice? And Tony, I know you wrote or co-wrote 8 out of 10 episodes of The Great, so I'm not even sure if you have a writer's room.
We do have a writer's room. I wrote the first couple myself before, because we made a pilot and then we got greenlit, but part of the thing was I had to deliver episodes as well as the pilot. And then I think I had 2 or 3 written and then got the writer's room. And then we just, I don't know, we did, it's small, there's only like a few, and then I think tonally the show's very specific, so I end up writing a lot of it, and I like writing, so, but yeah, I mean, we just do the normal, I guess we just break the story, and in the end, it's sort of like the room reduces, so in the end there's only like me and like 2 others, and and we just break it as we go. I break it while, we sort of wrote 6 before we started, and then we sort of break it as we go and leave the last 2 to the very last minute in case something interesting is happening. We try to jump on.
Even for a historical show, you might want to weave something in?
Yeah, because I'm not very historical. I'm making a lot of it up. So yeah, I mean, I changed, right, I think 2 weeks before we shot the last block, I completely changed how I was going to end the series. And so, yeah, because I was seeing some things I was interested in. And so I just quickly wrote the finale right at the last minute so I could capitalize on some stuff I think would work.
Can you tell us how you were planning on ending it, or is it a secret?
I can't really, because a lot of it I'm shoving into season 2.
Of course. Michael, what about in your room? You have so many, or I should say, I should speak in the past, as I know your show has ended, but you have so many amazingly talented writers. I'm curious if it's like herding cats sometimes.
No, not really. I mean, I learned how to do this from Greg Daniels on The Office, and he had this very specific sort of approach, which was like, it's sort of a communist enterprise where all of the stories are broken communally as a group, and then he would wait until the last second and then assign the outline and then all the notes to one writer to go off and write a draft. And that writer writes the draft, interprets everything, and puts it in a script form. And then once that writer is done, it sort of like becomes the communal property of the little commune again. And so it's this nice way of, everybody's invested in every episode, and then you just learn to not have an ego about turning over your script back to the room to improve it and stuff. So, and then he was really good at maintaining whatever the specific voices of the writer who wrote the draft through the rewrite process, because it's not fun to feel like you turn in a script and then it just gets completely wiped out and it's brand new by the time it airs. So he would be really good about making sure that he kind of kept chunks of the original draft no matter what. So, a lot of the people who wrote in The Good Place were people who had worked with me on other shows. And so we all it was a very smooth process because we integrated new people and stuff and brought new people into the fold, but there was a sort of consistency from one show to another. So everybody kind of knew the drill, which made it a lot easier, I think, than it might have been. What
about What We Do in the Shadows room? What is that like?
We run ours as a capitalist enterprise. No, we do. I think the interesting answer is, how is it different than other writers' rooms I've been in? And I think we spend a lot of time together breaking the stories in general, but then we do a lot more actual writing, maybe than is necessary. I mean, after we've broken a story, writer takes it, does an outline, gets notes from me and Stefani and Sam, rewrites the outline, then writes a draft, gets notes, rewrites. So a lot of it is actually, words on paper. And we don't do a ton of rewriting communally. It's sort of, as sticking with the capitalist procedure, I try to pit all the writers against each other to each try to excel and take, the share that's theirs and try to torpedo the other writers.
Try to dominate. You want them to dominate each other, yeah.
Sure. Dominate each other, and that competition just brings out the best in everyone.
Sounds very healthy. Kristen, Sam, I'm always fascinated by writing partners, because it's just something I don't think I could ever do with another person. How did your partnership sort of begin, and can you just sort of tell us how it works?
Well, we were assigned to each other freshman year in college. So, so we just started playing foosball together and discovered we had the same sensibility. And then we had a zine in college to show our age.
This is more new information. I didn't know about the New Yorker piece, and I didn't know about the zine, and I've known you guys for like 30 years.
Yeah. What was the zine called?
Our dorm was called Branford, and it was the Branford Basement Communique. And it was basically just, it was sort of Onion-esque, where you're just writing in that kind of news fashion about people we knew. And
don't worry, and I'm not going to bust your guys' balls about that at all. Don't worry.
No, that's
new information.
Well, Sam's just down the road from you, so he's going to get most of it. So I'm happy with that. But then, we just started writing together. Wanted to be wrote for magazines, and just
we
kept
never
going.
really wanted to be, we weren't really interested in writing for television after college. It was much more.
Because we didn't know how much it paid.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, if I'd known I could make more money, I could dominate my own father by writing for television, I would have tried to get that job a lot sooner. But yeah, we were really interested in writing for magazines, which we did for a while in New York. And then, yeah, we lucked into a job, just the first iteration of like Comedy Channel, which led us to MTV and then out to News Radio, where we met Paul. But, Chris and I are just we're not like temperamental arguers. And
it helps that we're both passive aggressive.
Yeah.
So like if we're working on something and Sam change it, I don't like it, it's like, well, I'll just change it back and see what he says.
Right. It's basically a policy. If Chris changes if Chris's lousy joke that I cut finds its way back in the script, then I know he really loves it and I won't take it out again.
Very generous of you.
Yeah.
For Kristen and Mike, your writer's room must be very different because you must have to work week by week because of current events. Or are you able to plan out long-term things at all?
You or me on this one?
I did last.
We are able to plan out long-term things to some extent. Obviously, with the election, a lot of things now get bumped, but our act ones on the show are usually the topical act, and that's the thing we're doing that week. Unfortunately, that's even a little harder just because, since we're taping remote now, everything on the back end takes longer. Like Sam's husband's literally shooting with a cell phone. So he has to upload 4K footage over a Wi-Fi connection, which takes a lot longer than it might out of a camera to an edit bay. So we actually have to tape and write earlier. So our topics now are a little more evergreen, but our act twos are always supposed to be evergreen. And those are the ones we plan out ahead and write maybe 1 or 2 months ahead of time.
For each of you, what do you think you bring to the writer's room that is specific to your talents and abilities? What do you think is sort of your place in that room? We can start with Kristen.
Wow.
Sorry, you're down there.
Well, I can definitely say the reason why I was first hired as a staff writer for Sam is they wanted a goof. They wanted a full, silly person. Because the room at that time had a lot of policy wonks. It was very heady. And I was coming out of SNL where I did characters and pop culture stuff. And I remember the day that I was meeting with Sam, I was like, I just want you to know, I don't know the names of my senators. That's not who I am. So I will learn them. But I don't want you to think that I'm going in with all of this, I care, but I don't deeply know yet. And she appreciated that honesty, I think, and I definitely came on board as a joke writer.
Mike, what about for you?
Somewhat the same. I think they were also looking for sort of an experienced late night writer, and I had been previously the head writer of that Bill Nye Science Show on Netflix, so I think I'd also had experience in writing informational comedy. And I think that they wanted someone who was kind of a combo, who had both done informational, but also I was a joke writer. My first TV job was a monologue writer on Fallon. So I think they just want someone who could do jokes and information at the same time.
Tony, you're kind of the boss, so I guess you bring a little bit of everything.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, because the show's the way it is, I have a good eye for the balance of the show. Probably, of how much drama and how we're telling the story, is probably, and I love stupidity, so that's always a strong point.
And Michael, for you also, you literally had this vision. I don't know if it was for all 4 seasons, if it played out exactly as you wanted, but you're the person in charge.
Yeah, it definitely was not all 4 seasons. It was the first season. And then the rest of it is the work of a whole lot of people. The reason I like this job is because it's like a team sport, and it's really a wonderful way to spend your time, to get the 12 funniest people into one place at one time and all work on one project. I never for one day fail to recognize how ridiculous that is as a job. I've been doing it for a long time now, and it is amazing every day that's true. So, you know, I think that your job as a showrunner is mostly to like facilitate, it's to be a point guard, to facilitate the other people being funny and being able to express themselves and like come up with funny jokes. I think if I have like one thing that I bring that's good to that job, I think it's that I have low blood pressure. Like I don't rattle very easily, and it's a job that can be rattling. And I for whatever reason, I think it's just my disposition is pretty like kind of chill. And so that is what allows me to kind of be the sponge that absorbs the stress and anxiety of the basic daily aspects of making TV. And that I think allows the other people around me to like relax and be funny. But really like I said, the best part of the job is that it's a whole bunch of people working together. I'm in awe of people who do it themselves, partly because I don't know how to, and also because it just seems like there's it seems like a thing that can't be done unless it's being done by a large group of people, not just writers, but like everybody on the show. Like there were so many jokes in our show that were pitched by like, you know, props people and costumers and yeah, like just people like graphics people who come up with funny posters or books or whatever. Like that's the most fun part to me, when everybody feels like they're invested and that they have some kind of thing to contribute. Like that's my favorite part.
I wondered about that because every frame of The Good Place is full of Easter eggs, I feel like, and I didn't know if the writers wrote every single one of those visual jokes or...
Well, we wrote a lot of them, but also, you know, we had a visual effects guy named David Neednagel who did all the, you know, computer animation, and he is just a super creative dude. And he would come to us and be like, what if we do this in the corner of the screen? What if we do this? What if we do this? And his ideas are great. And it was really fun. Saying yes is so much more fun than saying no. That was a Lauren Michaels thing. I don't know if Kristen, if Lauren ever gave you this speech. Lauren has a lot of like aphorisms about TV. And one of the things he said is, which is often true, is that the hardest part of being a producer is you have to say no to people because everybody wants to chip in and contribute, and you'll write a sketch that will be like set. This shows you how old I am and how Lauren's been using this anecdote. But when he told it to me, he was like, you're going to write a sketch that takes place in a phone booth. So we're already back in the like 1980s. But he was like, you know, the guy, the you know, set decorator will come and say like, hey, there's these really cool phone booths that are used in, you know, in Serbia, and they have this cool ornate design. And you're like, no, sorry, I just need it to be a regular New York City phone booth. And then the costume designer will come and say like, hey, I was thinking he could be wearing this, you know, crazy purple suit. And you have to go, no, sorry, he just needs to be dressed regularly. And so like you have to say no all the time because people just want to be part of the fun. And that is hard. And so when you hire people who are really talented and great at their jobs and you get to say yes all the time, that's just way more fun. And you know, that was a lot of what The Good Place was about, was the writers and the art director and the set designers and the props people. Everybody was really talented. And so it was really fun to go like, yeah, great, keep going. Like, do whatever you want. You know, that's a really fun little bonus perk of the job when it works out.
Yeah. Stefani, what about for you? What do you think is your area of expertise?
Oh man, if I had to say, I think I'm the heartbeat of the writer's room. The light, the wind.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. If I'm being like real with myself, there's probably a really good chance that I'm like the buzzkill of the writers' room. You know, like I'm the person that's like, yeah, enough fart jokes. There's no story here. Like I feel like there's unfortunately probably like a little bit of that truth in there. But I think, as Paul has pointed out to me in more recent weeks, the most important thing to me, and no matter what writers room I'm in, no matter what genre, is the story. It's always going back to the story, and no matter how we're having fun in the room, what kind of jokes we're making, I feel like to me, those jokes don't work necessarily if there's not a story that we're going back to. And I feel like I am often reminding everybody about that. Paul?
No, that's true. That is true. And that is Stefani is very good at story and reminding us, like, if there's no story, it's just a grab bag full of jokes and it's not going to mean anything to anyone. Although, as much as I love her, sometimes it does hurt where she's like, well, this just doesn't make sense. And I'm like, well, fuck you. I mean,
I
come
know.
on.
I'm sorry. That's good though.
But she's right. I won't. And what I bring to it is, I don't know. I've been thinking lately. I feel like I've been doing it long enough that I have a instinct when an idea or something is a story, and I think the flaw in that is sometimes I'll say to the writer, all right, go off and do your outline. That is, I guarantee you, that is a solid story. There's a good conflict in there, and there's so much you can do with that. And sometimes I feel like I abandon people too early to do that. But
I'd say one of your positives is that, if I may speak on your behalf,
yes, please.
Is that you are so great. I've worked with so many, I feel like, people that, when ideas are thrown out in the room, you can kind of see people weighing it in their minds and deciding yes or no if we're going to go down this path and we're even going to entertain this idea. I feel like you do such a good job of entertaining everything in a way that doesn't feel like it's taking up anybody's time, but is so respectful. And there's no bad ideas. There's no like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. How would that work? It's like, even if an idea doesn't quite make sense or doesn't quite work in the world of our show, it's like, you're so good, I think, about making it make sense, or at least
I do. I guess actually, no, I do have a straight. I like to be surprised by something that I didn't tell someone to do. You know what I mean? I love getting an outline or something that has something that we never discussed and I never said you need to do this, and being surprised by it and really laughing. And those are always my favorite parts.
Yeah. Paul was our first boss on, when we went to sitcoms, and it was a great news radio, and it was a great experience because it was surprise me, be aggressive. And then you can get into rooms where it's worse to be wrong than it is good to be right. Like if you do something stupid, they never let you forget it. And like that was the essence of news radio, was to be stupid. And the other thing about Paul too is that he's very good at like the kind of tennis. Like you come up with an answer and then it inspires Paul to come up with a much better answer. And that's kind of your job, is to like, I'm just gonna pitch stuff and see what you can do to top it.
As long as I win the match, I'm happy.
Well, that's the essence of capitalism, is the match is fixed.
Sam, we've been talking for so long, the sun has set behind you.
I know, I'm another day older.
But what do you think some of your strengths or areas of expertise are?
Oh, I don't know, a refreshing breath of older male energy, maybe. I don't know. It's funny, like Kristen and I got hired at News Radio after we had worked at Beavis and Butthead. And so we were able to tell stories about Beavis and Butthead. And then we got hired at Frasier after News Radio because we could tell stories about News Radio. What was it like working there? There was no writer's room. Did Paul really leave and go on dates while everybody else worked? And so we had to tell those stories for a while. But then after Frasier, we just got hired places because we had good stories about Kelsey Grammer. So that's basically been our career.
It is surprising even now in the Shadows room how often Frasier questions and things come up.
Really? What's your go-to Kelsey Grammer story that you can share with us?
Don't tell it.
I don't know if there's anything that I can share.
Once you said that you can share with us, like they all went out the window.
Yeah. He's a very nice man.
Or obviously Mike and Kristen, I think you're still in a writer's room at this point. You're doing a virtual. Yeah. Is anyone else currently doing a virtual writer's room?
Yeah, we are.
You are, okay.
Yeah, which is sort of half Zoom and half human.
Oh, you are in person?
Yeah, because we're in Sydney, so a couple of the writers are from Sydney, so they're in person, and then there's 2 writers in the States, and so they're not. And they hate us because we spend all our time going, I'm just going to get coffee. I'm going for a swim. I'm like, we're going to the movies later. It's painful for them. But yeah.
They say, necessity is the mother of all invention. I'm curious if there's things you like about doing a writer's room over Zoom, or things that or things that you have found beneficial.
No.
Nothing. No, it's terrible.
Is it terrible?
It's so bad.
Yeah.
But no. Here's one thing that's nice. So we have to cover the conventions. So we didn't have to go to the RNC. So that
Oh yeah.
Okay.
When we got this job in February, we were like, fuck, we're gonna have to go to the conventions. Let's plan for that. Let's plan, like, everyone's gonna have to get hotel rooms. Let's figure out what that special looks like. And then when this happened, we were like, well, I guess we stay home. Like, that was kind of nice.
Nice. That's one small terrible thing. Yeah.
That is a bonus. But everybody else doesn't really like them.
They're not great. I mean, the thing I will say that has been nice about them is, at least in terms of what we do in the Shadows Writers Room, which was ongoing, at least at the beginning of us quarantining and isolating, was just like the mental health relief of it all. Like, I mean, just sitting in your home, watching the news, and, you know, it's just every fucking waking moment was just sort of felt very stressful. It was nice to get on a Zoom call with familiar faces and do nothing but just talk about things that made you laugh. So in that way, I feel like it's been a great silver lining to be able to still do that. But other than that,
that part I loved. And then once that first 45 minutes of the day are done and we go like, all right, now, so what are we working on? Then it's like, someone's voice is cutting in and out. As soon as you say something funny, people are laughing. They don't hear the second half of it. You can't, I'm constantly making eye contact with Stefani or Sam and then realizing that I'm not actually making eye contact with them. The screen, it's frustrating, and I can't wait for us all to be together again.
Have you banned virtual backgrounds? Because in a lot of my work calls, I see people fading in and out of San Francisco.
No, we played
Paul's
around.
got a great virtual background.
Yeah.
I can't show it right now.
It's just Kelsey Grammer. It's Kelsey Grammer looking over his shoulder.
Very close, actually.
For the comedy series, you all have these amazing casts, and I wonder how much you gear the writing towards them. Just as an example, Stefani, you wrote On the Run, which centered on Matt Berry's character Laszlo going undercover, and it was pretty much like he was the center of the whole episode. Was that out of a desire to give Matt a showcase, or have you guys ever changed up a story to fit an actor's strengths?
That's a good question. I feel like in the case of that episode, it was just more about the story that we were more interested in, the idea of just placing this character and putting him in what feels like this middle of nowhere small Pennsylvania town and making it feel more like like a made-for-TV 80s movie in that way. And that was the thing that was most exciting. But it's great writing for Matt and all the characters. I think our ensemble, and they just blow me away every time I get to see them perform, or even just watching them on post. And I've said this before, like we do watch cuts of the show where I feel like we're laughing out loud like it's the first time we've heard any of these jokes or seen any of these takes. So in that way, I just think they're so amazing. But Matt, in that episode, or him in general, Matt Berry, I think I've been a fan of him for a long time, and I love Toast of London, and I love Snuffbox and all of the work he's done before. And he is a very specific type of comedy and way he holds himself and performance. So I think just being at least a little bit familiar with that is helpful in writing for someone like him. But again, the entire cast is just so specific in the way that they approach their characters, and they're so nuanced. And not only are they nuanced as characters, but people. So as I get to know them, and I feel like as we all get to know them and spend more time with them, it's much easier to write to not only their sensibilities, but to to what they find funny, to things that they're willing to try. And at times they will come to us saying, I want to try an accent like this, or I want to sing, or, I think this might be funny. I don't know how to work that in. So they're very collaborative in that way. But again, they're so specific and kind of magical as individuals.
And Sam and Chris's episode, the initial kernel of the idea was we knew Matt Berry is an accomplished musician himself. And then I said, that's good enough. That's a story. Go, do it. But a lot of the show, there is a lot of improv that goes on when we're shooting, and a lot of subsequent things about the characters and even storylines come off of some offhanded thing that someone tossed off in episode 2 that then makes it into the edit, and then we're like, oh, all right, that's part of their character now. And so it's really a back and forth sort of thing.
Michael, what about for you? You had this amazingly talented ensemble. I'm curious if you ever learned of special talents that you ended up working into the show.
I'm not sure there was anything juggling or singing or anything, but I kind of always think that the best way to do this is to have there be like a 30% maybe Venn diagram overlap of real person, actor, and character. Like you don't want it to be like exactly the person who's playing the role, but you want to take some of what makes them special and interesting and sort of swirl it in, you know? I mean, I'm hardly the first person to have this brilliant idea, but I always feel like if you can do that, I think it makes the actor feel more sort of on solid ground, especially at the beginning of something, because it's like, well, this isn't a complete sort of, you know, imagination exercise. It's sort of like a little bit of me is in there somewhere. And, but then you're also like giving them the freedom to sort of explore and do new things. So that's definitely true. I mean, in our case, like William Jackson Harper's character, Chidi, we cast him and then we sat him down to explain the character and explain what was going to happen to him, and his reaction. And it was like, you're really indecisive. Like that's his main thing is that he's so paralyzed with the question of like what to do that's good, or how to be like a good person, that he never makes any decisions because he can't he just can't get out of his own head. So I explained that to him, and his reaction was like, oh, my girlfriend is going to think that you wrote this for me. Like he's like, this is me. Like he takes like 45 minutes to decide what restaurant to go to because he just can't make decisions. So sometimes you just get lucky and you kind of create a character that runs parallel to the actual actor you cast. And that's great. But when it doesn't work out, I always think it's better to try to find something about the real person and kind of stir it into the pot, because it just makes it sort of more, I don't know, it's sort of like, it helps to set the character, ground the character in the specific actor's voice.
Speaking of William, did you have any idea when you wrote that he would be taking his shirt off and walking through sprinklers that he was so buff?
We did, yeah. We didn't just get lucky. We knew, we had seen him in costume fittings wearing like short sleeve shirts, and he's like super jacked, and we were like, that's insane. And then, you know, his character was a philosophy professor. So it didn't make any sense. So we had to like retrofit an idea. In fact, we had two philosophy professors who were sort of like, consultants. And when we didn't know how to describe something, we would call them. And they would say like, this isn't right, or like, you're not talking about this the right way, or whatever. And after that episode aired, when he took off his shirt and he's super jacked, one of them sent me an email and said, this show's been on the air for like 3 years now, and I have to tell you that like Will's physique is the most wrong you've ever been about philosophy. Like that's the idea that there would be a philosophy professor who looks like that is it's absolutely impossible. So
I like that the day after, surprisingly buff Chidi was trending.
Yeah. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, he's buff for like a buff guy, and then he's supposed to be like a dorky professor. So we ended up retrofitting an explanation, which was that someone told him. The explanation was that someone told him when he was like 13 that doing push-ups relieves stress, and so he basically started doing push-ups and never stopped. That's how we explained it.
Before we go to audience questions, I just kind of want to ask something that I feel all writers probably have to deal with, which is writer's block. Do any of you struggle with it? And if so, how do you get out of it? Mike is nodding, so I'm going to start with you.
The one fortunate thing about writing a late night variety show is you don't have time. So even if you have writer's block, it's your job to just go through it. Also, because we're only talking about one subject versus splitting off and writing different stories together and pitching jokes together, is that like, you have other writers to help you, where it's like, I'm really stuck at this point, or can you take over this point? Or, we'll have a joke hole and we'll go, everyone quick, we have 30 minutes, write a joke real fast. But luckily that time frame really pushes you to work, and you just got to get through it.
Mm-hmm. Kristen, for you?
The same as Mike for variety. When I'm working on my own stuff or like a narrative thing, I think my trick is to give myself time to get bored. I think so many times when I'm having a hard time working through something, it's because I'm pressuring myself to finish a piece or to get something done. And if I can just be bored for a while or relax, or right now it's kind of impossible, but usually live your life, that helps. But those are my tricks for overcoming block.
Tony, what about for you?
I don't think I've ever really suffered from it, I guess. I mean, I have all those psychological tricks of, I don't ever type straight away because I can't bear to like type things and have them stare back at me telling me how stupid they are. But if I write it on a yellow pad, for some reason that seems to, I don't give a shit. So apparently that's the freeing thing. So I always write everything longhand first so that I don't care so much.
Even all the dialogue, like a whole scene?
Yeah, I write the whole script on yellow pads and then I type it up.
Wow, you must go through a lot of yellow pads because people talk very fast and eloquently in your work.
We do go through, hundreds, yeah.
Stephanie, for you?
I think similar to what Kristen said, I think the first step I think would be to just recognize that it's part of the process. I think when I was younger, when I was in college or just got out of college, when I did experience it, it felt so catastrophic to me, and I turned on myself and became very judgmental towards myself, and I would beat myself up for like, oh, why, isn't this easy? This should be easy, and maybe I'm not a good writer if this stuff isn't easy. But I mean, gaining some perspective, it's helpful to recognize that it is part of the process and it's okay. And taking time away from work is helpful, just stepping away, moving on to something else. And even if it's not removing yourself completely from the work, it's moving on to a different part of the work and making space in your brain for those answers to come, I think.
Michael?
I have a lot of problems as a writer, but that's not one of them. My main problem as a writer is the opposite of writer's block, where I write, I have like, here's what I want to say. And then I write it and it's like a solid C+. And then it's harder. I wish that I hadn't written it, because it would be easier to fix it if I were starting from 0 than if I were starting from like a C+, So the writer's block isn't the thing I suffer from. I suffer from like a kind of like excessive rewriting problem. Like I keep tinkering and I write things and try to wrench them from a C+ to a B-, and then from a B- to like a low B. And like, it's a constant kind of like rewriting thing.
Sure.
I don't know.
Paul, what about for you?
I think like Kristen and Mike Drucker, and maybe Mike Schur, I started, my first TV job was at Letterman, and I quickly learned that you can't wait till you're in the mood to write, or you can't wait till you're feeling funny. It's almost more physical. You do it because the show's about to go on. And once you've done that for a while, you can, my only good piece of writer's advice is treat it like you would exercise or jogging. If you haven't done it in a while, it's like, oh, I can't run 5 miles, or I can't write 5 pages. But once you do it every day in a row and make no excuses for yourself and just physically sit down and do it, it gets easier, and you learn that you don't have to wait until you're feeling inspired or whatever. I mean, it might all be crap, but even if it's crap, you've gotten better at writing by getting rid of the crap, so you know what the good stuff is going to be.
Late night is key to that. Like I feel like everybody should work for 1 year in late night comedy, because it first of all destroys your ego in a great way, because it's like you fail so much. You just fail constantly, day after day after day. So you become inured to the concept of failure. Like it doesn't bother you anymore. And also like like Paul just said, you just have this deadline, and it's like, this is going on television. Like do what you can, do the best you can, but like you can't get fussy, and you can't like sort of be a perfectionist about it. You get really good at editing your own stuff. You slash whole pages of stuff and throw it in the garbage. And everybody who's worked in one of those jobs has that same feeling of like, in a writer's room, you'd be like, well, we have to cut this whole thing. And if the person is from late night, they're like, yeah, that's fine. Just chuck it. Like you just stop feeling so precious about your writing. Like it's like a poem that's going to be chiseled on a pedestal of a statue. And you get used to it as just like one step in a long process. And it really is at least for me, it's been incredibly, like, I'm so grateful for all of the sketches I wrote at SNL that bombed so terribly, like so bad, like flop sweatingly bad. Like that was my first job, and it just drummed all of the preciousness out of my body. And there was a lot of it to be drummed out.
It also is a great experience to like on late night shows or even multi-camera shows, to have a live audience, just to get that immediate feedback. It's people misunderstand it and think like, well, you're just writing whatever's going to make everyone laugh. But what you're really doing is if something dies, you have a hard time going, I'm telling you guys, that was funny.
Right,
you know?
right.
And there are sometimes that happens, but and probably with Tony in a play also, you can feel when there's an audience there, you can feel like, oh, that moment that I thought was the best part ever.
Right.
Everyone's
I always feel a bit sad for people. Not sad, but it's like some writer friends who haven't had the live, because nothing teaches you like in a physical way to sit in a theater with 600 people not laughing at your hilarious.
Right.
It's like it just becomes like really it teaches you all different things about rhythm, all these ways how to tell and performance and all that kind of stuff. But it really, on a cellular level, does destroy your ego in a really good way. In that you are very you're happy as a showrunner. I'm happy to throw half a script out and go, we can do better. So I do think it's really good in teaching you about rhythm and about and just like that thing of just dying does something good for you. Weirdly enough, you come out a better person or something.
Sam and Chris. Oh, sorry.
No.
Working together, does that help avoid writer's block because you're there to egg each other on?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I'd love to talk more. I'd like to go back to more of Paul's tips about jogging and so forth. But,
yeah, he's laughing at me because I'm really not an athletic person, but I use that's the only metaphor I can think of. Come on, guys. You know when you go for a big jog.
Yeah, no, for sure. Having a partner, you just don't have the same issues as when you're pounding your head. I mean, there's plenty of times when you really hate yourself and what you've written, but it is great to have somebody else who can fix that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, because when I'm working, we'll divide up a script and I'm working at my half and deeply hating myself. But then I was like, well, tomorrow I'll get to see these great Sam jokes. So, it's just life is not all bad.
Yeah.
But we also walk around a lot. We also do, there is a lot of exercise involved. Yes, we do take long
good. I approve of that. That's good.
Yes. He's not wrong.
Kristen's remark reminded me of something I feel I've seen in a lot of rooms where the room is stuck. The room is blocked about a story point or something like that. And then something like lunch comes and everyone starts standing up. And as standing up, on the way to the door, it's like, hey, what if this? Or, sometimes just that changing your physical, where you are can really break this negative flow you have.
Absolutely. I want to take some questions from the audience and forgive me in advance if I mispronounce anyone's name. We have a question, actually, Katie Dorr. Michael and Stefani both spoke about blending actor personality and talents with the character. How much interaction is there between the writer's room and the actors?
Stefani, you want to go?
Yeah, in the case of what we do in the shadows, there isn't much, at least when we're actually in the writer's room. It is only the writers in there, and we keep that pretty separate. When we are on set, we, I think, are a little bit more open to, like Paul mentioned, improvisations and different takes on things, and the actors are physically there, as are Paul, Sam, and I, so we have conversations with them and they are there to physically give us their feedback. But as far as the scripts themselves, those are done with just the writers.
But there are also, like I was saying earlier, there are also times where some random improv that someone made it earlier, then they get to the table read and they read the script and go oh, that was just a joke I tossed off. And we're like, no, that's one of your 3 character traits now.
Right. Yeah.
Tony, what about for you?
In terms of the actors, not pretty separate, really. And they don't really have much. They sort of know it as it goes. I give them an overview if they want an overview at the start of the season. And lots of them don't really. They just want to know it as they get the scripts. And some do, I think Al does, Nick doesn't. So it just depends. And then on set, we don't really we're pretty hardcore. We don't really, we don't improv at all. So no one changes anything. So it's not like they can have that conversation and ask. Because especially first season, and we're trying to set up a very specific rhythm for the show and a very specific tone that felt like it might be easy to destroy. So if we got it wrong a few times, So it was very much like just sort of, you know, the way it's written is the way it should be done. So, and they were all on board with that. I think that a lot of English theatre actors who are sort of used to that, you know, they do it as it's written, you know, so yeah.
Michael, what about in your case? Did you have any of those amazing actors hanging around the writer's room?
Yeah, my favorite thing about SNL is that everybody does everything. Like actors write and sometimes writers act, and it's like a sort of big like community theater kind of a deal. And again, like on The Office, that sort of spirit came over to that show where, you know, there were a lot of, you know, some of the people in the writers room were on the show, Mindy Kaling and Paul Lieberstein and BJ Novak, and so I kind of like that. Like, I think that in comedy, especially, that the sort of dividing line between actors and writers, it can be good and it can be bad. And the bad part of it is when there's like writers are jealous of actors, and actors can think that writers are dorks, and you can have this weird kind of artificial kind of barrier. And so we encouraged the actors to come and like hang out with us all the time. You know, they weren't like pitching stories and stuff, but I would pitch them the whole season at the beginning of the year and sort of explain what was going to happen so that they knew. And I just like to foster like a friendly sort of congenial situation where they're always welcome. And so they would come up and hang out, and it was great because that meant we could stop working for a while. So I like it when everybody's friends, at least, even if they're not like actively, you know, pitching or rewriting or something.
We have a question from MAP Gordon. It's for Kristen and Mike. Wants to know, are you tempted to continue shooting the show without an audience, even when the pandemic ends? In a way, it would be freeing.
God. I think we probably won't have an audience for a long time. Because I think this pandemic is going to go on for a very long time. So we're not really thinking about it from the point of view of having an audience. I honestly think this is a really depressing thing to say. It's going to be a couple of years, guys. Like, holy shit, we're not going to put Sam on stage with like 100 sick people. So it's going to be a minute. But in a world where there is no pandemic, I definitely think we do miss the audience. I mean, there's nothing better than hearing people love your stuff and getting that instant gratification of a joke landing. But we are not letting ourselves think about it until there's a vaccine.
Probably smart. We have an anonymous question, kind of a craft question. Do you think it's helpful for new diverse writers to have writing samples that showcase their authentic voice and story, or to have a more general sample that is less specific? I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in.
I'll weigh in on this hot button issue. No, I do. What I look for when I'm reading people's scripts is what's specifically funny about them, and like a unique voice, rather than trying to fill in the blanks of something. But I do think lately, just because of a lot of other shows I've been on, I think sometimes people default to going, well, this is my life story and I'm going to do a version of it, and forget to heighten it or make it funnier or find the emotional essence of it and then go off in whatever direction they want. The scripts that jump out to me are the ones that are obviously more made up, if that makes any sense. I mean, but now I'm really just digging myself in the hole to get canceled. But like, for instance, the Atlanta pilot script was very personal to Donald, but at the same time, that Atlanta, the show, is very surreal and weird. So it wasn't just like, this is a slice of my life, this is what it was like. It took that emotional core and then really expanded on it and made it something more than just a little slice of life, I guess.
Yeah, I'm hoping Teddy Perkins didn't happen in real life.
There were elements of it that were real.
Really? Oh, wow. We have a question for Tony from Batia. How much do you think about international audiences when writing? I don't think this person is from America, because they want to know if you fret about whether a story engages or offends viewers in St. Petersburg, or are you writing to a more discreetly limited audience pool? Thanks and be well.
Beepers. I don't really think about. I mean, I think about. I don't really think about an international audience. I just think about whether we think it's funny in the room and the actors think it's funny, and that, you know, you're sort of just trying to amuse yourself most of the time, and hope that strikes a chord with people. So no, we never really think about that.
Interesting question for Mike and Kristen wants to know, from James, wants to know what's the hardest part of producing bits for shows like Full Frontal? Are you ever worried your jokes will be taken by other late night or news comedy shows?
Yeah, I'm never like, because especially like in the before times when I was at shows like Fallon and everything, like, you know, you're writing jokes at the exact same time and there's going to be news stories where everyone thinks of the same joke. Or you think of the most unique joke and you're like, this is crazy how good this is. And then 2 days later, another show does it. And you know that it's just a group of 20 people are inevitably going to come up with that joke. And sort of like what I think Mike Schur was saying, you can't be precious about it. You kind of go, yeah, that was my joke. Someone else did a similar joke. All right, what's next? So that's not too bad for us, I don't think.
I do think the bigger concern for us is because we're a weekly show, we want to make sure that we're not telling the same joke that another host said. So that's the bigger worry, I think. And of course, it's a little harder right now since we're writing things a little bit more in advance than we used to. But we try to pay attention to what other people are doing. And it's a numbers game. I think, like, you know, the more that you write, the more gets tossed away, the more that gets on air, and not, I think, the less emotionally attached you are.
Yeah. Kristen and I, like, if we've seen a joke somewhere, or if it's like the big joke on Twitter, we're not going to do that joke. But, you know, if we do the joke, then we see it on another show a day later. That, I don't think that ever bothers us.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all so much for being here with us today. Congratulations. It really is. It's really been a great year for television, and all of you are a large reason why. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. Thank you, everyone at home, for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet all of you.